Coming at you from the ATL, from inside the paint and beyond the arc. This is Nothing But Nest, your Atlanta Hawks podcast. Now, here are your hosts, DeShaun Tate and Caleb Johnson.
Welcome into Nothing But Nest, episode 40, as we come to you in the postseason. The regular season, we wrapped it all up, got everything all ready to go, and there was just a couple of different directions that this could have headed for the Atlanta Hawks. Thankfully, we get to talk about the positive direction that it's headed. Caleb Johnson, and with my co-host, DeShaun Tate. DeShaun, how does it feel seeing the Atlanta Hawks pull off the 116-105 win over the Miami Heat and advance to the first round of the playoffs?
Hold on, let me see. Is this thing clear, Caleb? Is this thing?
It is,
Trying to make sure. I want to make sure this thing's clear to see. No, man, it's great. I mean, listen, the crazy thing is I've been on all of this positivity for, with the Atlanta Hawks for quite some time, and we weren't really seeing much movement. And then all of a sudden, typically, negative Nancy Caleb Johnson gets into his positivity mode, and then all of a sudden, that just means we need more positive Caleb Johnson.
That's it.
In order for this team to start acting like that they're actually playing for something. I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna go as far as saying that this is the best performance that I've seen the Atlanta Hawks have all season. I would certainly say, number one, it feels that way, number one. And then number two, it's definitely been the best game that we have seen them play in quite some time. And that's not, in days. That's not in weeks. Like, I feel like that's in months. So listen, congrats to the team. I like to see them carried on. I don't know how they did it. Some of these numbers I'm looking at, as I got my nice little handy dandy notebook. Well, I should turn it the other way because I don't want you picking up the answer key. But I'm kind of like, wait a minute, am I seeing? I mean, I know I'm getting old, but like, I don't know. I saw how they did it. And then I'm still trying to figure out how they did it at the same time. So I'll say this much, Caleb. Like, one thing I don't want to hear from those Miami Heat fans and whatever else, I don't want to hear we beat ourselves. People love to do the we beat ourselves game. Like, I think it was pretty clear. Atlanta went in there and they beat Miami.
Yeah, any of the whining going on is probably compounded by my dog Salem, who's apparently at my door right now whining because she can't get in. And I'm sure that's how Miami Heat fans feel right now. Just very whiny, as now they've got to go deal with the situation of hosting another play-in game on Friday. The Hawks in this one, look, coming into this thing, I talked about it on the very short episode that we did a couple days ago. When it came to this one, the Hawks hadn't beat the Miami Heat in Miami since March 2nd, 2021. You know who the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks was on March 2nd, 2021? Lloyd Pierce.
Yeah.
It's been that long, 7 straight games that the Hawks had gone down to Miami and left with a loss. It felt like this was just starting to become the Achilles heel of Trae Young. He goes down there and they've just figured him out. Eric Spoelstra and his staff frustrated Trae Young so much in the past.
Hold on, Caleb. Give me that date again.
March 2nd, 2021.
I don't think he was there. I'm almost willing to take you up on that one. I think, and I could be totally wrong, but I feel like Nate McMillan had just been on that job
1 week later.
For 2 days, right? I think they got rid of Lloyd Pierce on the 1st of March. It's not important. I'm going back in my brain and just it doesn't matter. I'm with you. I shouldn't have interrupted you. Please forgive me.
It's fine. You're actually right. You're right.
That
was game one. That was game one.
That was the first game of
Nate McMillan.
Nate McMillan.
Yeah.
Look at good job, DT. Good job, DT.
I had completely forget. So I had it in my head that I was like, it was the following week that they had fired Lloyd Pierce. But no, you are right. So But
I'm
that's how
surprised you
long.
admitted. I'm surprised you admitted to it. Number one, but number two, long as I don't get no pushback when I'm texting in on the station line, and I'm like, we do this podcast thing, and I gotta educate Caleb Johnson sometimes. So this is where that
Hey,
comes from.
well,
just so we're clear.
and speaking of that, this is just like a completely random side note.
Side note, okay.
I was on the pregame, or excuse me, this was before the pregame show on Sunday. It was Saturday, so I was doing my show on 92.9 The Game on Saturday. We were coming back from break, and all of a sudden, I hear these two guys discussing Trae Young, and it was the two of us on the Nothin But Nest podcast. We've got ads running on our station and apparently other Odyssey stations. It was kind of cool to hear. Even though I did feel slightly bad that the excerpt that I have is I'm going to criticize Trae Young when he needs to be criticized, and I'm going to give him his credit when he deserves his credit. I'm going to do that in this podcast as well, as I know that sounds like a very negative thing, but I feel like it's just what we've had to do with Trae Young this year, who coming into this game, DeShaun, of course, because he hasn't had a chip on his shoulder as of late. Oh, we just decide to float out, and I say we very loosely, some quote unquote media float out rumors that Trae Young is potentially on the trading block. Yes, thank you for that look. And if you're not watching this podcast on YouTube, please
Shame
go
on
look
you.
up. Yeah, please go look up Nothin But Nest and watch the two of us on YouTube, because DeShaun Tate's face is perfect for that moment. Of yes, these rumors get thrown out there that the front office has greenlit, the front office has been given the green light to trade anyone, including Trae Young. And because of all of these things that have been going on, this is, part of Quinn Snyder coming in, is that he's looking at shopping Trae Young. So much so that at the beginning of the broadcast, it was reported by Jim Jackson, who was calling the game, that the front office called Trae Young before today's game to let him know, hey, these are completely bogus. Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer is the one who put out the article that had these reports in there. And I just wanted to make this note to Sean as we, before we get back to talking about this game and talking about where this is going to lead the Atlanta Hawks this season. There's a couple of things that happen in NBA media from time to time. Either it's the beginning of the year and you're trying to get some storylines going because not a whole lot is going on. You might dig up some old reports or old rumors that you heard, I don't know, a few months back. Or you get into the postseason and you need to start talking about teams that you haven't paid a whole lot of attention to. And so you go, what do I got in here? Oh, yeah. The last time we were talking about this team was when the head coach was fired and they brought in a new head coach. And, oh, yeah, there's this whole thing about Trae Young could potentially get traded. And, oh, yeah, there's that report that if the Hawks don't make, substantial headway in the playoffs in the postseason, that Trae Young may request a trade. All of these things. So it comes out today. It's bogus. I can tell you that anything that is going on right now is not focused on Trae Young potentially getting traded. Now, is anyone on this Atlanta Hawks roster 100% untradeable? No. And that's never been the case. Even when management has come out and said, we're absolutely not trading, Trae Young or whoever they might have wanted to put on that list, no one is completely untradeable. And if the Hawks found themselves in a position where they might want to consider it, if somebody makes a phone call, that sort of thing. I'm not saying there's absolutely no way it's going to happen, but this is just not a focus of the front office, of the organization. They they want Trey here. Like, that's Quinn Snyder didn't take the job because there was because it was like, oh, he can come in and trade Trey. Like, that's just not what this is about. And it feels so lazy. And honestly, it's just needing a story, and they got exactly what they wanted out of this, which was a lot of attention and a lot of conversation.
Well, here's the thing. I'll say just a couple of things on that real quick, and I promise I won't take too long.
Oh, sure.
So the first thing is, I am a believer, not that I know this for sure, but I'm just a believer that there is one player on this team that is untradeable, and that player is number 11. That's not a fact. That is just my opinion.
Sure.
That's the first piece. The second piece is, I feel like that, these conversations, forget about the conversations. I had this feeling, there was this vibe and this energy built around. I said, listen, all that's going to happen is at some point this season, the only thing after the All-Star break, these guys are going to come on and play. Did it take a little bit longer? And granted, we're not trying to act like because they sold up the 7th seed that, they won the championship by any means. But I think that this is the time and the point of which we are about to see that I told people, hey, oh, now this is the Atlanta Hawks team that we expected to see that would have been, 4th in the, East or whatever, what have you. I know it's just one game. I know that it is essentially just 48 minutes on a floor, so you can't erase all the other stuff before that. And in addition to that, I just felt like people were going to say, oh, well, this is the Trae Young that we were expecting and, hadn't seen. And who was the idiot that left him off the All-Star roster and all this other kind of stuff. I think that's kind of where we are headed. Are they really that far from where they were, especially basing off and judging off of some of these numbers, Caleb? Probably not. But how impressive the win was, considering the fact that they also did not play their best game. It may have optically looked like it was their best game. But when you start going down and breaking down this game, I think it's pretty clear that it was not. The other piece in which I will address is these rumors and all these different things. In the words of my great grandmother, God rest her soul, that ain't nothing but the devil. Listen, that's all that it is. When you start coming up with all these different, people always love to have something to say. And I think because Trey has this villain-ish type reputation around this league and whatever else, what have you. And of course, things, optically, and just not even about optically, just things didn't look great this season. I think that's pretty clear. Unless you've been living under a rock or something, you would know things have not gone the way that the Atlanta Hawks have wanted it to go on and off the floor in many cases. But it ain't nothing but the devil, okay? What are they going to say now? And especially, what was it, like 17 analysts, or they did a poll vote or something along these lines earlier on ESPN or something? You may want to reiterate and inform the people, or that may not even be important, but I feel like, and I'm not saying they're going to duplicate, I'm not saying they're going to replicate, but I feel like I remember something very similar at the very beginning of the playoffs when they played against the Knicks, okay? All of the analysts and all of the writers and all of these different people were talking about, the Hawks might win a game in the series in the first round. And they couldn't have been more wrong. Actually, I think the Knicks were the ones that may have won like one game in that series before the Hawks went on and played to contend for the Eastern Conference Championship. So I'm gonna just leave that right there. I'm gonna just let that marinate. But let's just remind the people that it ain't nothing but the devil.
So you are correct that according to ESPN, they had 17 panelists pick whether they thought the Miami Heat or the Atlanta Hawks were going to win this game. And this is it's a great reminder of when you ask panelists, when you ask a lot of national media, they just don't watch every team, especially not every game. And so they're going off of information that they hear, the rumors that get thrown around, narratives that get created, and it's pretty easy that when you look at a guy like Jimmy Butler, he's an all-star. He's also very well respected in the NBA. And you go, Eric Spoelstra, very well respected in the NBA, a great coach. And then you just look at on paper and you go, Trae Young, a guy who we've been expecting a lot more from, didn't make the All-Star team this year. He got a second coach fired, whether it's all his fault or not. We don't really care about that. We'll just throw it all on him. And then we'll put on the fact of, Quinn Snyder's taken over this team, but he's still new to things. And so he hasn't had enough time to really turn this all around, not really paying attention to the fact that, we've seen some pretty impressive turnaround from the Hawks when they want to give effort. And I think, we talked about this when it came to the Philly game of, they fell flat against that one, but I was one being like, hey, I just don't think they're giving full effort in a performance like this. So I'm not really that concerned. I know I went on and I did some radio appearances talking about the same thing. I had, Chris Thomas, a host here in Atlanta, was losing his mind over a loss to the Philadelphia 76ers B team. And I was like, look, it's not a big game. And so they didn't play like it was a big game. The Miami Heat, a 7 versus 8 seed play-in round, you advance and go on to the first round of the playoffs. That's a big game. And the Hawks showed up for it. Trae Young showed up for it, even though his final stats don't really show it. 1 of 8 from 3, finishes a team high 25 points. But of course, 8 of those come from the free throw line. There's so many different areas. This was really kind of a tale of two halves, was also a big part of this, DeShaun, where this team just came out really dominant in the first half. And then the second half fell back to some old habits, but it was very much a bend but don't break. That classic trope that gets thrown out quite often. But it truly was they had built up enough of a lead that they made mistakes in the second half. They went to some ISO ball. They went to some just making a singular pass and a guy puts up a shot and it's not a good shot. That leads you to shoot 10 for 41 from 3-point. But they did enough in the first half, especially with their big men, that it made enough of an impact. And they got done what they needed to get done when it mattered the most. And that's something that we hadn't seen enough on a consistent basis. But you saw it coming together with Quinn Snyder. And I think that's what all of these elements is how you end up with 17 panelists saying, I'm just going to pick the Miami Heat. And then you got DeJounte Murray calling them out on Twitter after tonight's game. I thought that was pretty funny. I think there is another element of this, DeShaun, that is interesting and could lead us to what could be a really lengthy conversation. But I want to read to you some comments that Eric Spoelstra made after the Hawks win over the Miami Heat. Spoelstra said, quote, Quinn Snyder has done a real good job of just creating an identity for that team. They're different in terms of how they really try to crash and get second opportunities. Did you hear that first part?
Mm-hmm.
Eric Spoelstra, head coach of the Miami Heat, not a guy to just make up stuff, but give credit where credit is due, says Quinn has done a real good job of just creating an identity for that team. The Hawks have an identity now. Like, what? I mean,
all of a sudden.
Yeah, you talk about the potential for them making at least some sort of competitive run moving forward. It feels like that's where this starts. Is we couldn't see this team really doing much of anything because they had no identity. Quinn Snyder comes in and is trying to establish that form, which his whole thing has been offensive rebounding. I want offensive rebounds. I want guys crashing the board on rebounds in general, but then offensive rebounding. And then he wants guys to shoot threes. He spoke about that in the pregame, and they shot him. They didn't hit him, but they did shoot them. And I think Quinn's ideology is like they'll shoot them enough that they'll start clicking. It'll start hitting, and we'll start being more successful.
I
It feels
just
like all
think,
good things, right?
well, absolutely. And this was not. You might look at the score or look at particular things. You might think that this was one of the greatest games, like I said, that you've ever seen by the Hawks. But when you're looking at the fact that two
Mm-hmm.
scored in single digits.
Yeah.
Not that Clint Capella is this dynamic, offensively gifted, high volume scoring piece for the Hawks. But you got two guys that are in the starting rotation that score in single digits. You got three guys, two of them included, a total of three guys that total for 20 points. The bench that I'm always ragging on all
Mm-hmm.
the time. I didn't even total up. I didn't even have enough time I'm not great at math, but there was so many points it was just impossible
53.
for me. 53 points by the bench. Outstanding. That's what I look. We talk all the time about on this program, and just like how you had mentioned something earlier about how there's little things about that are running on the station that we have to say and whatever, what have you, about you criticizing Trey when he deserved to be criticized and giving him the flowers when he deserves to get those. But the crazy thing about it is that we love to be wrong when there's things that we
Yes.
have to say that people are
Yes.
not going to be happy about, that are diehard fans.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I think that gets lost in translation, because obviously we want to see. I mean, this is our job. Of course, we want to see the team do well, play well. That's more eyes and ears on what we're doing and so forth. But you also got to factor in. I was thinking, like, what's going to happen when this team is not when the team isn't shooting well from three? Are they still going to be able to have this kind of performance? They shot 24% from three, I believe, tonight, and it
Yeah.
didn't even really feel like it was 24%. They also shot poor from the charity stripe, what I like to call the free space on the bingo card. They didn't
Yeah.
even shoot 60% from the ones that you get for free. Now, one thing that they obviously, I think, did help them is, even though they have more turnovers than Miami, we all know that Miami is this great physical team. Trey talked about it a little bit in his post game conversation with the guys on TNT and whatever else, what have you. They had more because, obviously Miami's this stifling, hang their hat on defensive anchor type team, but yet still 12 turnovers ain't bad against a team like that.
Nope.
So those 12 to 8 turnovers there, but then the paint points was so great for the Hawks. When you already talked about the rebounding, we're really rebounding 63 to 39. I don't know how many that is. It's far too much for me to count right now, but I know that it wasn't remotely close.
Yeah.
And then the points in the paint. When you have a physical presence like a Bam Adebayo in there who plays great defense, and certainly on an average year, at least minimum, could be up for Defensive Player of the Year awards. There's just so much credit that you have to give the Hawks here. Sometimes I got a little bit concerned, like, is it at some point going to become kind of easy to telegraph some of those lob passes? But they kept working. I felt like there was a stretch where every other possession was a dunk, and they were just very. How can I explain it? The Hawks played very uh, fluid
Mm-hmm.
and free flowing, where I felt like Miami was like out of control. They were out of sync. They picked the wrong night to have a terrible game, and it's like the Hawks were out. It almost kind of seemed like they were out for blood. Like, we hear
Yeah. Well,
everything that everybody is saying, type of deal.
it's interesting that you point that out, because I thought from the jump, DeShaun, that the Atlanta Hawks were showing a level of physicality that we have just not seen from this team. We've seen them as the team who is getting called for the foul and is looking over the ref like, come on, what do you know? No. They were in there and they were getting called for offensive fouls. And that was when, early on, it was, I know some people on social media were getting concerned because they were like, Hawks getting called for offensive fouls, and this is going to become an issue. And it was like, no. There's a thought process to this. And this goes all the way back to something that Nate McMillan was trying to get this team to do, and he couldn't figure out how to get them to do it, which is if you play physical from the very beginning of the game, the officials go, oh, this is how this game's going to get played tonight. Not you play a certain way for 3 quarters, show up in the 4th quarter wanting to play physical, and the refs go, whoa, hey, you haven't played like this all night. No, that's a foul.
Yep.
No, if the officials go, oh, this is how we play in tonight. Okay, cool. They get on board with it. And then you end up having a physical game that you, as you mentioned, you attack the paint 64-46. You outscore the Miami Heat in the paint because you established that level of physicality from the beginning. And it extended to offensive rebounds. I mentioned earlier that's something that that Quinn Snyder wants to really focus on. You out rebounded offensively 22-6 on the offensive glass the Miami Heat, who have Bam Adebayo. Like, it's not like they're out here don't really have big men, to defend the paint. Even throwing out old 75-year-old Kevin Love out there. Like they have size on this team. Jimmy Butler is going to get his, and yet I don't know. The Hawks stayed with it. And that's just, it was really impressive to see. It was also at the same time, DeShaun, I do have to say, a bit frustrating because it was like, so you're telling me you could have been doing this a lot longer. You just decided to do it tonight. And that means we can go expecting it moving forward, right?
Yeah. You like to think so. Obviously, Boston is up next, so we'll get into more of that a little bit later on. But it wasn't even about the sheer dominance that it appears that the Atlanta Hawks, displayed against Miami. For me, it wasn't even about that nearly as much. Because many times in these games against Miami, I'm not sure that it was as clear as most people thought that it was. And I'm trying to remember how many games I had it written here as to how many games that it was that they had lost to Miami. I think maybe like 7 straight no, not 7 straight. I don't know if that was 7 straight at Miami or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, 7 straight at Miami.
7 straight at Miami. Right. But I don't even think it was about the fact that they're just that much better of a team. I just think that there were some mental hurdles when you're playing against Miami. There's some mental hurdles that the Hawks kind of had to get some adjustments and make some adjustments and kind of get past them. So it wasn't about the sheer dominance that they appear to have put on display tonight. For me, the more impressive thing was the run that you knew Miami would eventually go on. Is the Hawks going to crumble and fold, or are they going to stand up and have some pride and say, no. We're not letting up off the gas on this one. Like, they made their run, but we're going to respond to the counter punch, if that makes sense. And that was the more impressive thing, because time after time, we've seen Atlanta Hawks play well against so many different teams, and teams come back on them. And it's like, see, I knew it. Too good to be true. Same old song, same old Hawks. But if not for nothing else, forget about people are automatically going to start fast forward and go into the 7-game series and not going to give them much of a chance. Most people are going to be willing to give Atlanta about a game. Wouldn't be surprised if it was a sweep maybe, but likely give them a game. At max, people are going to say I'm going to give them 2 games, and that second one is probably going to be on a Hawks buzzer beater in State Farm Arena. That's just the reality of what we're looking at. But
Sure.
before we even get to that point, let's enjoy, if for nothing else, the one that we saw here on tonight in the same season where they've looked so questionable. You never really, I was talking to some diehard Hawks fans on yesterday, and we were having some conversations, and they were asking me about this matchup, and I said the Hawks haven't really given me a reason to have confidence in them against Miami. That's not negative, Nelly. That's not oh, you're
It's
not a
reality.
Hawks fan. That was reality, and that's reality for all of us. If you're being honest, if you cannot be objective about your favorite team and be honest about your favorite team, that doesn't make you a real fan, in my own personal and humble opinion. They never gave us a reason all year long to even believe this game that they could beat Miami. And they went out there and they proved a lot of people wrong, including this person. I do want to see it carry over and spill over into the next series, but I'm going to enjoy this one tonight, Caleb.
All right. Well, I will let you enjoy it for 3 more seconds. There we go. I think I stopped for about 3 seconds. All right. There we go. You got to enjoy it. Hawks fans got to enjoy it. But now preparation begins for the Boston Celtics. And no, you can't really say the Boston Celtics that they saw on Sunday, because that Boston Celtics team didn't have any starters. I think maybe Derek White. Derek White did play in that one, but outside of that, no starters. DeAndre Hunter, of course, gave it a few minutes in that Sunday game, but that was because he was coming back from injury. Had just played his first game in 4 games back that previous Friday. So a completely different team that you're about to see on Saturday, because that's when round 1 for the Atlanta Hawks is going to begin in Boston on Saturday. That's a 3:30 tip-off. It is an ESPN game, but I am going to throw the plug in there that if you would like to tune in to 92.9 The Game and come a little early, if you come at 3 o'clock on 92.9 The Game, you will catch the pregame Atlanta Hawks Radio Network pregame show that I will be on the air for. I've got the halftime and postgame show, hopefully of a win. I mean, I would love nothing more than to get to be on the air for a first game win for the Atlanta Hawks in Boston, because no one, like you just mentioned, DeShaun, no one is going to pick the Atlanta Hawks, much less to win the series, but especially not to win game 1 in Boston, when the Boston Celtics have had a week off to prepare, for this game and just get healthy as a team, get rested. The big question that I'm going to be wondering about is whether or not Jaylen Brown is available. DeShaun, did you see this whole mess with Jaylen Brown last week and his hand, and why he's very likely not going to play this week?
No, I've definitely skimmed past some bits and pieces, but I tell you what, and I know we're gonna get into the Jaylen Brown. I know we're
Yeah.
gonna get into the Jaylen Brown, and we need to get into Jaylen Brown for a good reason. But that other Jaylen, Caleb, I'm little by little, maybe not
Yeah.
a lot, maybe
Yeah.
not a lot, maybe not a lot, little by little. Where was this dunk at, by the way? I felt like early in the 4th quarter, a tip
Mm-hmm.
dunk. Listen, I'll say this much about this series, and I promise you we could definitely get to the Jaylen Brown stuff, but I want to make sure that I mention this.
No, do it.
The
He
the
deserves it.
last time that I checked, and this isn't just about him, this is about this team. The last time that I checked, a someone who has everything to gain, nothing to lose, back against the wall, just laying all the chips out on the table, just laying everything out. And nobody really giving them a chance. There's not many believers. That's a dangerous man right there.
Mm-hmm.
People who ain't got nothing to lose. You know, there's going to be something to say. I don't think it's going to be the kind of series that everybody's going to think it is. I think we brought this up the other day when I was talking about, and I get it, it's not the same teams and whatever, what have you. And I get it that maybe the Hawks, series record against Boston, obviously not very good. That 1 year, I think they went, when it was a 1 versus an 8 seed, I think it was, and they went 7 games, whatever, what have you. And Boston with that, Rondo and Garnett and Ray Allen and whatever, Paul Pierce, whatever. But anyways, when this team is at their most dangerous point and very confident when people are counting them out and not giving them a chance. They've got the pieces. I don't know if the bench can withhold, but speaking of that bench, when you start talking about the Jalen Johnson, I mean, we didn't get a chance to see guys like AJ Griffin. I mean, they've got a little bit more than what I think they've shown, and they're going to get some of those opportunities to do so. And having Jaylen Brown or not having Jaylen Brown, I'm sure they'll prepare for Boston to have Jaylen Brown. But even if not, I can see the Hawks, certainly putting themselves in position to win a couple of games in this series. And if you can win 2, especially with one of them being on the road, you're giving yourself a real chance.
Yeah, you talk about that bench. I saw a stat today that honestly had to, wipe my eyes and be like, hold on, did I read that correctly? Coming into the All-Star break, the Atlanta Hawks had the 22nd ranked bench when it came to scoring. Since the All-Star break, they've had the 3rd ranked bench in scoring in the NBA, right? Like, things have turned around rather substantially. And I mean, that obviously helps when you trade for a guy who shoots threes a lot, like Sadiq Bey. And when you already have a guy like Bogey who did miss a substantial part of, before the All-Star break, missed 30 games. So those factors are obviously going to play in, but it felt like they established something. They figured out Jalen Johnson, you mentioned, coming into his own, the 3rd leading rebounder on this team in the Miami game. That's, Clint Capella, Trae Young, and then Jalen Johnson as the 3rd best rebounder on this team. But he's doing his thing. Like, it was just, I don't know. It's been so positive to see this turnaround from him, where it feels like a confidence thing, DeShaun. Like, I don't want to oversimplify and say that he hasn't worked to have a more technically sound game, but it just feels like so much of this is he's not. It feels like so often in year past and even at the beginning of this year that it was like, oh, excuse me, sir, you can have that rebound. And now Jalen's on the boards like, nah, like, give me that. Like, it's just like that talk about, having that dog in him and that sort of thing. Like, it felt like I hadn't seen that from him. And now you're seeing that on more of a regular basis.
We're going to learn some stuff about this Hawks team in this series.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to tell you exactly why. We're going to learn a lot about the pride. We're going to learn a lot about, them standing up to, people are going to want to twist it to make it feel like it's a David versus Goliath type of thing with how dominant Boston has been over the course of the last couple of years. But, I will say this much is it's going to be intriguing with these matchups because I don't believe the Hawks are going to back down. They're not going to go away that easy. I do believe that they're going to stand and fight. And it wasn't too long ago that we seen Marcus Smart trying to trench, slamming Trae on the ground. Grant Williams likes to mix it up as well. And Clint made it very clear in their run a couple of years ago. That we ain't about to just sit around and be bullied. That type of deal. And when you start factoring in, I'm not sure where the other Williams necessarily is in terms of his health status. I feel like he's only available every other 10 games or so. But you've got a former Hawk in Al Horford on this roster The health condition and status is uncertain of Jaylen Brown, one of the bigger stars in this league, budding star, upcoming star. I say he is currently a star. Obviously, you talk about stars being, Jason Tatum, and you start talking about hostile environments. New York ain't the only hostile environment in the NBA. Trey's no secret, to hostile environments. So I think so many of these different things are going to just kind of play out. But feel free, and I want to see if I can get producer Rick, who we always appreciate more than anything, to throw our Twitter handles up there on the there we go, perfect. Thank you very much. On the lower third. Feel free to tweet at us. I want to know from diehard Hawks fans, diehard Hawks Nation, what does this Miami win change for you in terms of your optimism going into the Boston series? Because, you're always going to have those people that's like, pessimistic or glass half. And I don't want to go into optimistic or pessimistic. Let's say glass half empty, that are going to say, oh, well, congratulations on your win beating Boston so you can secure your seed. Well, now you're going to get destroyed, which I don't think is, close to the truth. But then you're going to have some overly, forget glass half full. Like, we're talking about like overflowing the glass now at this point, who are going to be like, oh yeah, they better watch out. We're going to win this series,
Hawks in 6.
Hawks with the sweep, type of people. But I want to get realistic. People involved in on this, feel free to hit us at Tate's Take Hoops, at ATL Johnson 18, to really chime in with us and let us know. Don't tell us after you see the first or the second game. No, we're not doing it that way. Tell us how you feel realistically about this series, not just this series, but the kind of impact and the feel that you get about the trajectory in which direction that this team is going in terms of, how many games were you willing to give Atlanta if they won this game by a point against Miami? And how many games do you feel, do you give Atlanta against Boston, considering how good that they looked? And I mean, listen, Bam Adebayo didn't even get a double-double. That's almost unheard of. Max Strus, shot what? I think about, 20% from three, which is almost unheard of. Something else is unheard of. Kyle Lowry with 33 points. Jeez, oh, peace. But somebody had to do it, I guess. And
I guess so.
did themselves a fine job. Just the way that they just, we hear so much criticism about Trey, and I'm sorry for getting long-winded, but we hear so much criticism about Trey. Trey looked mature tonight. Of course, people are going to automatically go point fingers and come with the notifications of, oh, he got into it with a coach after, whatever. Sometimes it's just competitive nature. Some people don't know how to draw that fine line in the sand. But this team looked good when they didn't really look that good, and I think that's scary for the next round for people who really aren't giving Atlanta a chance.
And here's the thing, DeShaun. That's what a win does. A win makes a sideline scuffle with an assistant coach in Trae Young, makes it the just 18th point amongst all of the things that you end up talking to. It makes it end up being something that didn't get discussed here until the 45th minute of our podcast, because it doesn't matter. Because, yeah, you get to go, hey, that's what happens in competition. But they lose that game, and you and I, within the first 10 minutes, are likely going, hey, this isn't a good look. This isn't a thing that you want heading into having to play a second play-in game to keep your hopes alive. Like, none of that happens because you took care of business. I think what I saw against the Miami Heat doesn't necessarily change what I think is going to happen in the Boston Celtics series. It just changes one thing for me. It shows me that the Hawks did actually care about this postseason. I wasn't sure. I wasn't fully convinced. I just didn't know just yet. Did they actually care about being in the postseason? Or is this one of those, like, the ones of us that are sticking around on this team, we're really focused on next year, and we want a clean slate. And so let's just 1, 2, 3 Cancun get out of here. That's not the case with this team. This team actually does care. You can even see that, DeShaun, with the TNT cameras caught. It was Tony Wrestler in the stands, and then you saw Kyle Korver and you saw Landry Fields come out of, and they all met together, and they're like, they're shaking on each other like they're excited, because I think there was this part of ESPN and many others picking against the Hawks. It was this, we didn't know what we were going to get. What we ended up getting is a team that cares, and a team that can, I think, create some noise. I'm not saying I don't believe that the Hawks can beat the Boston Celtics. I will be that person to come right out and say I don't think they can beat the Celtics in this 7-game series in the first round. Can they be competitive? Absolutely. Can they finish on a quote unquote strong note, headed in, to the offseason with some optimism? I think absolutely they can. It also does help. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but this is a crazy scenario with Jaylen Brown, who a week ago is watering plants. At least that's what he says.
What kind of plants, Caleb? What kind?
Hey,
What kind?
that's a great question.
Don't go scratching your head. No. Don't go scratching your head now, Caleb.
You know what they don't test for in the NBA anymore. So I don't know what kind of plants it was, but it just so happened to be a plant that was in a vase, and apparently that vase fell on the ground, and I'm assuming broke. And he tried to pick up the broken pieces, and when he did so, he cut his hand, which required 5 stitches to his right hand. I know there's like the idea that he could be ready to play. I just have a hard time believing a guy who is a shooter, and needs his hand to be intact, and there's a lot of movement coming in the ligaments and everything that gets involved with your hand, of spreading it out to catch the ball and all that sort of stuff, that I just have a hard time believing there's been enough time for his hand to heal with those stitches for him to be ready to play. And so if he's not available for this first round series, I will say the Boston Celtics do have a ton of guys. They have a very deep roster. But I think that gives you some sort of all right, that's one guy you don't have to worry about. Now you have to focus on these other pieces. The one last thing that I'll say about the Celtics series, because I know obviously as these games go on, we'll be doing some post-game recaps and that sort of thing. But I'll say this. Perimeter defense, I believe, is going to define this series between the Hawks and the Boston Celtics. The Hawks have not been able to stop the Boston Celtics on the 3-point line in the 3 games they played against them. Yes, one of those games was backups against backups. However, those backups, those reserves are going to play in this game. Sam Hauser, Mike Muscala, that's a problem if you've got guys. Peyton Pritchard, another one. Those guys, it was an insane amount of threes that they put up on Sunday, and Sam Hauser's been a guy who's really attacked Atlanta from 3 in the past. It's something that Jason Tatum has obviously been very, very good at. Marcus Smart's, and he can shoot threes. Like this Boston Celtics team can shoot threes. Not saying that that's like their main way of going about their offense, but against the Hawks, who give up those, who struggle with help defense and give up those perimeter shots, I think that's something that the Hawks have really got to focus on, to shut down. And if they're able to do that to some extent, they'll be able to win a couple of these games and keep it at least competitive for the series.
And I know that we're kind of up against it a little bit, but you made some very interesting points. Obviously, I mean, you start talking about the bench and how far down and deep Boston goes, into it. By the way, Mike Muscala, another former Hawk, by the way, of all things. But, the Peyton Pritchard piece, the Malcolm Brogdon, Atlanta ties, all of these different things, I think, the little things are going to be making it difficult for the Atlanta Hawks. But Guys got to go out there and put their shorts on one leg at a time, the same way that the other guys do.
Sure.
And there's 48 minutes on the clock for everybody, just the same way. Ain't gonna be no excuses. I do think it'll be very competitive. It's gonna be making out to be for a very interesting and intriguing series.
Absolutely. All right. Game 1 is on Saturday. Once again, at 3:30. Pregame will start at 3 o'clock. If you want to go listen on the Odyssey app, where you can listen to this podcast, you can also listen to the Atlanta Hawks pregame show at 3 o'clock. I'll be on the call for that, so it'll be a fun time. I'm excited for it. I'm excited for Hawks playoff basketball. And excited for the next time that you and I get together again, DeShaun, because hopefully we're talking about some Hawks wins. That will do it for this episode of Nothing But Nest. For my co-host, DeShaun Tate, I'm Caleb Johnson. Thanks for watching on YouTube, and thanks to listening to Nothing But Nest.